Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome if it is your first time here. My name is Natalie Beisner. I am a conservative political and cultural commentator, and let's just jump right into it. So, today I want to talk about something that the heinous shooter in Minnesota, the Annunciation Catholic School and Church shooter, wrote in his journal, because it has broader implications for the way that we deal with people who suffer from gender identity disorder in the West, in this country specifically, which hopefully is changing. And honestly, it can't change soon enough. It needed to change yesterday. And I've made videos on this topic before. I've made posts, so have other people, of course. But it's worth going over again in light of the horrific events that happened this week. And nothing that I say here is meant to excuse this man's, really, it's a young man's behavior, or to get you to have compassion for him. He is probably burning in the nether world, and that's not what this video is about, okay? It's not about compassion for him. It's about the broader implications of how we handle this. So one of the things that he wrote in his journal was, quote, "I regret being trans. I wish I was a girl. I just know I cannot achieve that body with the technology we have today. I also can't afford that." So that's a little brief passage there, seemingly innocuous in many ways, but that tells us so much information. There's 3 points here that I'm going to go through one by one. So, first off, he says, "I regret being trans." And isn't that interesting? Because parents nowadays are pretty much given a binary choice. You can either, if you have a son who believes that he's a girl, you can either have a living daughter or you can have a dead son. There is no other third option. You can either wholeheartedly affirm that your son is actually your daughter, he's actually a girl, or you can be a bigot, you can be a bad parent, and you can push your son ever closer to self deletion because as a transgender person, he's at a high risk for that already. And really, it's not just the parents of these kids who are given this binary choice, it's all of us. Pretty much in the West, the entire society has a proverbial firearm to its head, and we are told that we can either accept these people, accept that this is the way that they were born, that they were born in the wrong body, and that this is a valid identity, or we can question it, we can push back, we can refuse to accept that, to affirm that that's true, that you can become a female if you are a male. And in that case, we are pushing these people ever closer to self deletion. And that is just pretty much the height of not only delusion, but also emotional manipulation. That now you have someone's continued existence in your hands, someone who's a complete stranger. You have, in fact, an entire group's continued existence in your hands. And that in order for them to keep living, you have to lie to them, you have to lie to yourself, and you have to lie to everyone else. That is emotional manipulation of the highest order. And yet, of course, here's yet more evidence that this binary that's given to parents and to society is, in fact, completely false because we don't have all the information on this individual. Obviously, what drugs he may or may not have been on, how long he was in therapy or wasn't in therapy, but we do know from reports that his mother went with him to legally change his name in order to affirm his gender identity. And yet, so clearly, she was supportive in some aspect, right? She wasn't a bigoted, terrible mother. And yet, what does she have to show for that? Does she have a living daughter right now? Does she have a living son? No. She has, in fact, a son who has ended his own life and tragically taken out other children who were praying at the time with him, which is pretty much just the nightmare of all nightmares. So we know, we already knew that, but here's more evidence that this binary choice that all of society and that specifically parents are given is in fact a false binary. That in fact, those are not the only two options if you have a child or a young person who believes that they are transgender. Elsewhere in the journal, this person wrote that he didn't like his long hair, that it was pretty much the last vestiges of him being trans, that he wanted to cut it, it got in the way, and yet he was afraid that if he cut it, it would attract undue attention to him. And then he said, maybe I'll cut it on the day of the attack. And again, this person had a lot of problems. You can tell that just from watching the heinous video that was posted on YouTube the morning of the attack. So I'm not saying that the outcome would have been any different, and I'm certainly not asking you to have compassion for this person or to excuse their behavior, but it sounds as if he did not feel like he had anyone that he could tell that he was no longer trans, that he had made a mistake, that he was, in fact, detransitioning in some respect. Sounds like he didn't feel like that's something that he could tell, that he had support for that. Again, not excusing his behavior at all. And I'm not saying the outcome would have been different. But I am 100% saying that in our society, we stifle the stories of detransitioners because they're very inconvenient. Because if you go around telling everyone that this is a valid identity and that just some people are born this way, some people are just born in the wrong body, and they know from 2 years old, well, it becomes very inconvenient when we now have a huge and growing a huge and growing cohort of people who, in fact, are detransitioning and who are saying this is a huge mistake. My doctors led me down a wrong path. I was not informed of the risks. My parents maybe even led me down a wrong path. And why did no one stop me? Because I was a child and I couldn't consent. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened to this person. I'm not saying he started transitioning when he was a child or anything like that. I'm simply saying that we don't leave room in this society for detransitioners and we try to stifle their stories as much as possible. In fact, we're like barreling down this track at high speed and we're headed towards a collision course. We're headed towards catastrophe, and yet we refuse in the United States to redirect. And we're so single-minded when it comes to the issue of gender identity disorder that we actually this week had corporate media outlets, including the New York Times, go out of their way to try to respect what they assumed were this person's preferred pronouns. There was a headline in the New York Times, among other places, and there were sound bites as well of people in corporate media referring to this person as a she, her. For what reason? Who knows? I guess we want to be respectful of this evil person who committed this evil act, right? I guess we want to respect your preferred pronouns no matter what kind of terrible person you were, even if you're no longer with us, right? And you took out children on the way out, we want to make sure we respect your pronouns. That's so diluted. And then it becomes even more diluted when you realize that this person didn't even believe that he was trans. He didn't even believe that he was a female. He knew that he couldn't be a female. And it doesn't sound like he was really gonna throw a fit if you didn't call him a she, her. And yet here we are, again, barreling down this racetrack, refusing to look at the entire notion of transgenderism in any which way other than this one way. You gotta affirm it. You have to affirm it. You have to use the preferred pronouns. You have to affirm it, even if the person does horrible things, even if it's after death, even if that person was questioning and felt like they didn't have support. You just have to affirm it and you have to stuff down stories of detransitioners. That is how we behave around transgenderism in the United States of America. And it is so incredibly dangerous and unhealthy and just false. It's wrong. The second thing that he says, which is right, is that he wishes he were a girl, but he knows that he cannot achieve that body with the technology that we have today. And that is true. Listen, I don't know if we'll ever have the technology where you can actually transition into the opposite gender. I hope I'm long gone before that ever happens, but we do not have it today. And this might sound like a nitpicky thing, but it's important to be specific with language. And it bothers me. Even conservatives will do it sometimes. They will say, "Oh, started transitioning." When you transitioned, you never start transitioning. You never finish transitioning. You never transition at all because it's impossible to transition to the opposite gender, okay? It is impossible. Now, you can take hormones, no one's stopping you. I'm not saying it's a good thing to do. I'm not encouraging you to do it. Whether you should do it is a whole nother question, but you are capable of taking hormones, right? Just like you're capable of getting plastic surgery, right? No one's stopping you from that. But that does not change your DNA. That doesn't change your chromosomes. That doesn't change your insides. In the same way, if you get a nose job and then you have a baby, the baby doesn't come out with a nose that resembles your nose job nose. No, he's more than likely going to come out with a nose that resembles the nose you were trying to get rid of because plastic surgery is on the outside. It doesn't change your DNA. And yet we sell children this false bill of goods that in fact they can become the opposite gender. That they can, if you just take enough hormones and you take the puberty blockers early enough. And by the way, if you go on puberty blockers and then you go on cross sex hormones, you're all but guaranteed sterility later in life, which is an absolutely insane thing. Children cannot consent to that. Children do not understand what it means to take a drug knowing that it's going to guarantee your sterility later in life. Children cannot even comprehend what that means or what it might mean to want children but to not be able to conceive them. That's absolutely nuts. But I digress. We sell children this false bill of goods that if you take these hormones, take these puberty blockers, get enough surgeries, somehow, someday, magically, you are going to transition to the opposite gender. And you are never going to be able to do that. You might start to look more like the opposite gender at first glance, but you're never going to become the opposite gender. So why are we selling children on this lie? Because it is a lie. And here, this person who again is evil committed this heinous act, not trying to get compassion for him at all. But it kind of sounds like he realized the hard way that although his desire is to have a female body for whatever reason, he's not going to be able to achieve that ever. And why are we having young people learn this the hard way? Why are we not being honest with them? Why are we not trying to solve the problem from the inside out instead of the outside in? And that brings me to my next point. He says, I couldn't afford it anyway. And this is something that so few people ever talk about. And it blows my mind because the left loves to talk about privilege, right? Male privilege, white privilege. Yet for people who love to talk about privilege so gosh darn much, the entire gender affirming industry and the notion of transgenderism itself is built on a foundation of privilege. Number one, it is the privilege of voluntarily choosing to become a medical patient for life. So many people obviously have that thrust upon them. They are forced to become medical patients for life or for decades upon decades. And yet, here we have an entire cohort of people who are choosing to become medical patients for life because you need those hormones for life. And if you start going down that road of, in my view, mutilating surgeries, you need surgery after surgery. They're very high risk. You are in and out of hospitals. But even surgeries aside, you need those hormones for life. And we're starting you as young as sometimes 14, 15 years old. That's voluntary, and children cannot consent to that. But that's voluntarily choosing to become a medical patient for life. That's privilege. Okay. That is insanely privileged to be able to make that decision, even though it's deranged, to be able to make that decision. On top of that, very few people can actually what they call pass as the opposite gender. It's inordinately hard to do. When I think of people that I know who are transgender, I mean, famous people that we all know, public figures, Blair White comes to mind. Not a lot come to mind, honestly. You can almost always tell immediately. And this is because it's due to the fact that if you don't already have the luck of genetics that make you kind of maybe be able to look like the opposite gender, for example, if you're a boy, maybe you're a shorter boy, a smaller boned boy, skinnier, right? You kind of are started on that path, but even that's not enough. You need a ton of money and you need access to world class surgeons in order to achieve the look that you want to achieve. Again, you're never going to become a female, but in order to achieve that look of passing as a female, of looking attractive as a female, you need luck of the genetics and you need a ton of money. That is a ton of money that went into Blair White. Okay. Most people don't have that. And when you don't have that, you're going to look like a boy trying to be a girl and an ugly girl at that. And that's not even me being cruel. That's just me being honest. And then you could sit here and say, well, you are being mean and looks don't matter. Well, my answer to that is clearly looks do matter, or you wouldn't be pursuing these cosmetic surgeries in the first place. Clearly, looks do matter. You are desiring to look like the opposite gender in order to affirm your gender identity. And it's really not going to work out for you unless you have a ton of money to invest in this. That's just the reality. Obviously, your looks are not the most important thing. Obviously, your looks do not change your inner worth inside as a human being. And that's the whole point of this, is that you do have inner worth inside as a human being, but you just have a disconnect between your brain and your heart and the outside that you see in the mirror. And what I'm saying is we need to treat the root cause as opposed to just trying to fix you externally from the outside in. That makes no sense whatsoever, especially because you're getting started down this path that's going to cost a ton of money, a ton of time. It's going to be dangerous. And most people simply do not have access to those resources. So it is built on privilege. And then people say, well, this is why these surgeries need to be covered. They need to be covered by the taxpayer. They need to be covered by the government, by insurance, because they are expensive and I can't afford it. And these are life-saving, gender-affirming treatments. And to that I say, no, that's all the more reason for it to not be covered. Because if a young woman were to walk into a plastic surgeon's office and say, I need you to give me a nose job and a boob job right now, otherwise I feel like I'm going to off myself, any plastic surgeon worth his salt, hopefully, would say, no, I can't do that for you because you're not in your right mind. You're telling me that if you don't get these surgeries, you are at risk of self-deletion. You need to go get your mind right. And then maybe I can help you with these plastic surgeries. And yet, what do we do every day in this country? We have people who come to doctors. And in fact, we have a whole cohort of people who try to encourage us to pay for this as the taxpayer, to encourage the government to pay for it. In Argentina, it's fully covered in countries like that. It's covered in many respects here. It's covered in the military. We think that it's okay for someone to say, I need this plastic surgery and these hormones in order to keep living. And then we give it to them. And we don't give any credence to the fact that this is a spiritual, emotional, and mental problem. And we're completely glazing over that. And we're saying, here, let us help you try to look like the opposite gender so that you don't off yourself. And again, passing as the opposite gender is incredibly challenging for anyone. And that doesn't mean that you're unattractive, okay? Someone can be a very attractive girl, but it doesn't mean she can pass as the opposite gender. Or it makes it even less likely she's going to pass as the opposite gender if she's an attractive girl. This is very challenging stuff that we're talking about, and it's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to solve the yearning inside, the hole inside. It's not going to satiate it because we're just throwing spaghetti at the wall. We're taking a completely external approach and trying to get you to look the way you want to look and then saying, oh, that's going to solve the problem. And yet, we would call a young woman who did that unhealthy. If a young woman, needed all this plastic surgery in order for her to love herself, in order for her to keep living, we would know, in fact, that she's super, super unhealthy and we would feel badly for her. And yet, when it's transgenderism, it's completely the reverse. We say, "Oh, nope, give it to them. It's gender affirming. It's life-saving care. They need it. That's what they need because they were born in the wrong body." Never mind the fact that born in the wrong body is completely incoherent. Because saying you were born in the wrong body suggests that there is a right body out there somewhere for you, just floating around in the ether, I guess. Actually, it's a very religious kind of idea. It suggests that whether you realize it or not, you believe in a God, you just believe in a fallible God. You believe that there's a God out there who's putting souls into bodies, but with you and other trans people, he messed up. And that makes really no sense whatsoever, right? That doesn't make sense. If you were born in the wrong body, there's a right body for you somewhere. But that's not true. The body you have is the right body for you. Now, that doesn't mean you love everything about it. I have stuff I dislike about my body, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. And unfortunately, bodies fail sometimes. They fail early. Children get sick, young people get sick. But that doesn't mean that they have the wrong body. It's just, unfortunately, the reality of the cards that we are dealt with. There is no right body out there for you. You are living in your right body. So, how do we get your brain and your heart to align with your body? Because that is the much healthier thing long term. And that's something that's actually based in reality and in biology. And everything I'm saying here is not based in hatred for people suffering with gender identity disorder. Actually, it's based in compassion for those people. I imagine that they're suffering a great deal, that it's very hard to feel like you have a different gender identity, like you want to be a different gender than the one that you are. That's very challenging. And in fact, in some respects, I can imagine it maybe better than a lot of people. Because when I was younger, I suffered from a very bad eating disorder. It took over my entire life, I would say, for probably a period of about 3 years. My every single day was like structured around binging and purging. I mean, I had a job and I went to school, but that was like my whole life. And I kept saying I was going to stop, and then I couldn't. It really took over my life. And my point here is that when I looked in the mirror, I hated what I saw. And what I saw in the mirror did not match up with the reality of what other people saw. When looked in the mirror, I saw an overweight person, if not an obese person. When I looked in the mirror, I thought, I'm supposed to be underweight. I'm supposed to be skinnier than this. I'm supposed to be. And that's what I desire. And in fact, I'm going to abuse myself in order to get to that place. And had I sought medical treatment at that time when I was in the throes of this eating disorder, the medical professional would not have affirmed me. He would not have said, "Oh, you think you're overweight? Well, yeah, you're right, you're overweight. I'm going to affirm you in that. Oh, you think you should be underweight? You're right. You should be underweight. Let me help you. Let me get you liposuction. Let me get you on this extreme starvation diet." He wouldn't have done that, right? He would have tried to get my mind right, my emotions right, my heart right. He would have tried to help me from the inside out, not the outside in. And yet, again, with transgenderism, we do the opposite every single day. We try to help you from the outside first. We try to help you look like the opposite gender so that you can feel less dysphoria, so that you can enjoy living and continue living. That is not right. If anything, healthcare professionals should be helping us live the healthiest, longest, maybe even the happiest lives possible within the confines of our actual biology, within the confines of reality, because you can't break free from the confines of reality or biology. You just can't. And certainly, biology is unfair in a lot of ways. Like I already said, people's bodies fail early. Children get cancer sometimes. Women get to a point where they can no longer get pregnant. They go through menopause, they go through menstruation. There's a lot of ways in which biology isn't fair and life isn't fair. And that sounds trite, but it's true. It's not going to do you a lot of good when you have healthcare professionals who are trying to help you be healthier and happier and better, but they're also just completely ignoring biology and reality, your biology. That doesn't make any kind of sense at all. It may feel good in the short term, just like if I went and got plastic surgery. Well, it's going to make me feel good in the short term. I'm going to think I look more attractive. I'm going to have more confidence. But if I'm suffering in here, and I have a lack of self esteem, a lack of self love, that's going to come back. It's not going to be fixed with one or two plastic surgeries or three or four. It's never going to be fixed because the ache is in here. It's not out here. The problem is in here. It's not out here. We're going about it completely the wrong way. And this short passage in the journal of, again, this heinous individual who committed this horrific act, who deserves no excuse whatsoever for it, no compassion for it. But this short passage here can tell us so much because, frankly, it's the truth. And we're not telling our young people the truth. And we're leading them down a road that not only makes them medical patients for life, but also ultimately ends up in dissatisfaction and unfulfillment and maybe even more regret. We know more regret, a more suicidal ideation, more anger and sadness and despair and all of these physical risks and emotional risks because we're not being honest with young people. And the truth is that you are not born in the wrong body. The body you were born in is the right body for you. And when you are suffering with gender identity disorder, the issue is an emotional, spiritual, and mental issue. It is not a physical issue. And certainly, obviously, adults can dress how they like, do what they like. No one is stopping a man from wearing a dress, even though it's very weird. But if you're actually talking about trying to spend your life looking like, trying to look like the opposite gender, you have a heck of a hard road ahead of you. An impossible road, I would dare to say. And we're setting our kids up for failure. So we should be honest with them and we should try to treat them and heal them from the inside out, not the outside in. So, anyways, if you guys like this video, please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I know that this is, a verboten on YouTube in many ways, but I try to be as respectful as possible. Again, everything I'm saying here is out of love and respect for people who are suffering when they look in the mirror. It can be hard to look in the mirror and hate what you see. I think we all have had that experience at one time or another, but it's not solved by plastic surgeries or cross-sex hormones. And yeah, I'd love for you guys to leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe. Let me know what else you want to see on this channel. And thank you so much for watching to the end, and I will see you guys next time.